know what it is, and like you, I probably have a concept in my mind, but I wanted to speak with someone who's knee-deep in the no-code movement and find out how she thinks about it.
Starting right.
Before we get into that, I wanted to tell you about something that we've launched with MicroConf on Air, and what it is we're going back through the best MicroConf talks of all time, and we're taking the audio tracks from those talks, and we are releasing one every Tuesday morning on the MicroConf On Air podcast. So microconfpodcast.com, or you can go to any podcatcher and search for MicroConf On Air. And every Tuesday morning there will be a new MicroConf talk, and every Thursday morning there will be an audio release of our Wednesday MicroConf On Air live stream. We have 3 talks that have already been released, so you can go check them out. These are 3 of the top 5 rated MicroConf talks of all time. The first one is from Joanna Weed, Proven Ways to Widen Your Funnel Using Just Your Calls to Action. The other one is Designing the Ideal Bootstrap Business from Jason Cohen. And the third is Playing the Long Game, Making Entrepreneurship a Sustainable Life by my wife, Dr. Sherry Wallen. Coming up are talks from Patio 11, a talk from me, 11 years to overnight success, where I talk about the drip exit and what that all looked like. And then we're going to go on. We're going to dig into the best talks of MicroConf. We have close to 200 of them. So we have a lot of content to release that you can listen to via audio. So you don't have to sit and watch a video, because I struggle to watch videos even at 1.7x speed. And this is a way where you can stream it while you're doing the dishes, just like any other podcast, and we'll drip them out over time so it doesn't feel like a bunch of homework. So it feels like a jolt of creativity or inspiration at that moment when you need it. So for that, check out the MicroConf On Air podcast. In addition, I have mentioned in the past that Basecamp is a headline partner of MicroConf, and as part of that, here is a 60-second message from Basecamp. And as I've said in the past, I don't plan to sell ads on Startups for the Rest of Us, or to have ads running every week or anything like that. At this point, it's pretty infrequent. But with that, let's listen to the 60-second spot from Basecamp.
We asked founders and entrepreneurs why they switched to Basecamp when their company started to grow. Christina had just hired some more people. When it came to internal communication, everything was all over the place. There was more work and more people than before, and no way to keep track of it all. Sometimes information was in an email, sometimes in the chat room. They spent too much time on conference calls to figure out what was going on. Then one day, they almost missed a deadline for an important customer because the information was in the wrong place. She knew they needed to get organized, but all the software she looked at seemed complicated, and it would take too long to train everybody. Then she found Basecamp. Basecamp was all of her internal communication in one place, so nothing slips through the cracks. Unlike other tools, Basecamp has an incredibly simple structure, organized around your teams and projects. Your team will immediately understand and start using it when they see the 2-minute introduction video on our site. Go to basecamp.com to learn more and start a free trial.
Thanks to Basecamp for supporting independent builders. And with that, let's dive into my conversation with Helen Riles, where again we dig into the 42 side projects she's launched over the past decade, as well as dig into and hear her experience with the no-code movement. Hope you enjoy the show. So Helen, thank you so much for joining me on the show today.
Well, it's good to be here.
Yeah, it's lovely to be speaking with you. I've been watching some of the stuff you're doing on Twitter, talking about all these side projects you've launched, and I think at last count, are you over 40 now?
Yeah, I've got 42, something like that. Yeah.
Excellent. And are they all no-code? Like, did you write code for any of them?
Some are custom coded apps. Some I have done some coding for. Some that I've hired developers for as well. So I'd say the large majority are probably no-code related, or kind of using existing tools to build something new, really. So yeah, I think there's quite a mix in there. I think each one is quite different and uses a
I would work for a year and then get really bored at any place, so I was kind of unemployable is the way I think about it. But it doesn't sound like that's the case for you. It sounds like the motivation is much more about building interesting things that interest you, and like woodworking, or, I was going to say stamp collecting. I collect comic books, like old, silver comic books. Like, I do that. I do also make money doing that, but not that much compared to my time. My time would be so much better spent doing something else, so I just love it. I love the experience of it, and it sounds like that's why you're doing these hours.
Definitely. That is my end goal, is to have more time making those things, really. I think the skills that you learn from one definitely spill on to the next one. It's easier to spot ideas and trends and patterns and build on ideas and collect evidence for a project that you think has a better chance of succeeding. So it's quite nice to kind of take one product that's quite different to the next, but still try and have some experience and get better the more things you create, really. It's kind of sort of trying to increase your chances of luck by rolling the dice as many times as you can.
Right. I've heard you talk about the parallels, this concept I have of like building a tool belt. Part of stair stepping is that when you start out, you either have no skills or typically one skill. So if you're a developer, you know how to write code, and if you're a copywriter, you know how to write copy, and if you're a salesperson, you know how to be salesy or whatever. But building this tool belt, it's like, I imagine the batarang, or maybe you're a construction worker. It's like, oh, I'm going to learn to do AdWords on this one, and I'm going to learn to do SEO, and I'm going to learn to do maybe pay-per-click ads, or I'm going to learn to do word of mouth marketing. Use this code coverage. And well, I think you talk a little about that.
Yeah, definitely. I think going back to your sort of quick phrase about the stair step approach, I remember reading the article back in 2013 and thinking, realising that it's actually okay to do that. I think originally I was always quite unsure if that's an okay thing to do, and maybe I was kind of feeling almost bad for constantly creating things, and that I should maybe focus on one thing and become as a developer and focus on one thing. But I think I only over time realised that the best skills are kind of acquiring and trying to be perhaps more of a generalist in some ways. So I think I kind of look at each project as, even if it's not going to become profitable, what can I learn from this? Is there a new skill, a new tool? For example, a new app I built recently. I tested out Glide apps, which is like progressive web apps, and also print on demand. So combined two new things I've never done before into an app to see if that's something that works, if it's something that interests me. And now that's something I've tried and tested, and I can kind of move forward with that, perhaps in a bigger and better project in the future.
Yeah, that's really cool. And that's for Tiny Hello. I assume tinyhello.com. Excellent. And are they all no code? Like, did you write code for any of them?
Some are custom coded apps. Some I have done some coding for. Some that I've hired developers for as well. So I'd say the large majority are probably no code related, or kind of using existing tools to build something new, really. So yeah, I think there's quite a mix in there. I think each one is quite different and uses a different tool set, really.
What language or languages do you code in by choice when you're given the chance?
My kind of development experience is quite limited in terms of my day job doesn't really require any kind of coding, but I've kind of done a little bit of Python, a little bit of Ruby on Rails, enough to kind of spaghetti code my way into something I want to make. But often, even just starting with a template or starting with something pre-existing is a lot easier to work from. Yeah, so even just things like writing simple scripts to automate batch